Right, let's have some real talk about organic gardening. Hi Dory Tail. Um, Good talk. I am an organic gardener and I'm pretty strict about it. I don't really use any sprays. I don't disagree with doing any of that. I just don't do it. For the most part, I use fertilizer. I use compost, lots and lots of compost. But I haven't really historically used a lot of pest control. I usually kind of wait for the beneficials to step in and do the work for me. So one of the things that I've noticed, particularly with aphids, is if I kind of leave them alone and don't spray them or anything, that the beneficials come in. It'll either be ladybugs and their larvae or mealybug destroyers. I've noticed those a lot this year in particular, and their larvae will come in and take care of the aphid problem for me. For the most part. So when my plants were small, like particularly my peppers earlier this year, I did give them a little bit of help. I mean, the aphids were all over the little baby plants. And so I went in and squished them off and sprayed them off with a hose and got the bugs off. Now I'm going to show you a video real quick of the aphid problem that I have on one of my tomato plants, and they're just all over it. And I'm trying to decide the plant's healthy enough. It doesn't seem like they're doing a lot of damage, and there's a lot of predators on it, a lot of mealybug destroyers, which I think will take care of the problem. But these are really big aphids, and the mealybug destroyers are small, so I'm wondering if they really can take care of the problem or not. But there are a lot of them there, so I'll show you that video real quick. All right, so this plant there's a lot going on here. This is covered in aphids. So the little brown ones, these guys, not that guy. Oh, that might be, actually, that might have been an adult aphid. You don't want adult aphids because they get wings and then they fly somewhere else and infect something else. But there's a ton of them on here. I don't know what that little white bug is, but that little fuzzy white bug right there, that's a mealybug destroyer, and he's actually going around and eating the aphids. And I'm trying to decide, do you go in and like individually smush all of the aphids, because these are very different looking aphids than my normal ones, or do I leave them and let the mealybug destroyers have a really nice snack? It does feel like too big of a population to just completely leave alone. They're not doing, They're not doing a lot of damage yet, but it is kind of hard to decide what to do, especially in an organic garden. I could come in and spray this off, but is that going to negatively impact the predator population? I think if I were to leave them completely alone, we'd have a problem. So I may do that. I may just go through and squish them off, try to avoid killing officials in here, but I'll at least damp back the population a little, I think, just to give this plant a fighting chance. So that's the problem I'm dealing with. Like, what do I do? Do I go in and spray really hard with a hose? That'll do more damage to tomato leaves than it would to the pepper leaves. Do I go in and squish a lot of the adult ones? Because if I spray with a hose or if I spray with some sort of chemical, I'm going to hurt the predator too, which I think is kind of taking care of the problem. So that's a big question for me, is like, when I'm thinking about pests in an organic garden, I sometimes am giving it up a little bit to nature, and sometimes I am taking action, but it's maybe a different action than I would have taken if I was going to spray a chemical on it, or even an organic chemical, because a lot of the stuff that's organic gardening, it is organic, the quotes are probably not fair, that is organic gardening involves spraying your crops with different things, like for instance, when I have really bad the one thing I do use, I guess, there are two things. I use BT because it is actually a bacteria that you spray on caterpillars, and if I've got a really bad caterpillar infestation, that can be a really good way to handle it. You just spray the BT on it. It handles the caterpillars pretty well, at least knocks back the population enough that I can go squish the rest. With aphids, I haven't really sprayed anything on them that I know you can put like neem oil, or you can do, there's a few other things that you can spray to help with aphids, but usually I just use water. And so this year I'm trying to decide whether that is the goal or not. Let's go take another look. As I sit here and reflect on my choices as an organic gardener, I think it's really evolved over time. When I first had my first couple of tomato plants and I only had one garden bed, I absolutely sprayed. There's absolutely nothing wrong with spraying, but I have built up a arsenal, I guess, of beneficials in my garden. And I think over the years, as I've built up better soil health and better, there's probably some damage from aphids or otherwise, as I have built up my soil health and my overall organic environment, I think the beneficials have gotten stronger and stronger. If you have not had a garden before, there's no reason to expect that you would have a whole bunch of beneficials hanging out in your yard. So just something to keep in mind. At first, absolutely go for, whatever sprays are going to help you, get a harvest and also kind of get into organic gardening. And you can evolve that process over time as your soil health improves, as your plant health improves. And see, look at this. These are pretty bad. I haven't had aphids like this early in the season in a really long time. I think it's so wet this year. It's just a little bit of a different environment. And right now I'm trying to decide, in this video, I'm trying to decide what to do about this. In my first couple of years of gardening, I probably would have sprayed something. In this case, I'm deciding to spray with a hose. So this has been really effective for me. It gets off a lot of the larger population of the aphids, and then I can go through and just smush some of the remaining ones. It will knock off the beneficials, but I have found that it's pretty effective at knocking back the population far enough that the beneficials, which usually can fly, can come back and kind of take care of the rest of the problem. I am really hosing this down. I mean, this is a pretty serious spray of water. You'll notice, I'll show you later in this video, that there is some damage to the leaves, but that is okay. It is in the service of getting rid of something that the whiteflies, turns out there were whiteflies and aphids were going to do a lot more damage to these leaves. I had also noticed in there was the very start of some spider mites, so kind of a trifecta of pests, and it is well worth it to me to use a strong, stiff spray of water and maybe do a tiny bit of damage to some of the foliage, but in the long run, it's going to be the right call for my plants. See, there's the damage there, but again, I think it's well worth it. And I got most of the aphids off. I'm looking back 3 days later, and it really does seem to have knocked back the population enough to justify kind of the little bit of damage that it did to the leaves. And it also allows me to, while I'm knocking off the beneficial population, I'm not killing them. And so hopefully they can come back and help me out and make sure that, see, I'm just squishing a couple of the worst offenders. But again, I came back in a few days and the population is significantly improved. So definitely worth it here. And the method I would use, again, if I see this population continue to be bad, and spraying it with a hose maybe a couple days in a row or every other day for a week or two isn't working, or I'm starting to see significant damage to the plant, I would absolutely go back and find the right organic spray. It's not worth losing the plant, but I am going to try to give the beneficials a chance here to protect my plant for me. I think in the long run, it's less work for me. It's less expensive because I don't have to buy all those fancy chemicals. That actually right there is spider mite damage, and that's something to fight for. So anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today, for checking out this video. I think one of the hardest things as an organic gardener is just deciding when and when not to use the tools that are at our disposal and which tools to use in which situations. So it's always a little bit of a challenge, and I think this tomato plant's going to be fine. But it's hard sometimes. It's really hard to stay the course when you see a plant that's just really damaged by so many different pests all at once. I mean, this was a stressful one for me. I don't know if you could tell.